Hi everybody, it's Mr. Clark again with another chance to excel. Today we're going to leave the invertebrates and begin talking about the vertebrate animals, so that's kind of exciting. And so as we do that, we're moving into the phylum Chordata. And before we start talking about today's phylum, I want to talk, our class of chordates, I want to talk about just some general characteristics about chordates. So let's just tick through those. So first, chordates have a dorsal hollow nerve cord. So we can think of ourselves in this regard. So we have a spinal cord running from our brain through our vertebrae. And in these pictures below here, we can see in yellow, these animals below there, chordates because they have that dorsal hollow nerve cord. They also have a notochord. Now in us, a notochord gives rise to our vertebral column. So if you think about all the animals that have spinal vertebrae, we're thinking chordates. The next characteristic is they have pharyngeal slits. And you might be saying, well, Mr. Clark, I don't think I have that. But if you were to look at a human, or any vertebrate for that matter, as an embryo, let's see here. My pen is having issues. There we go. It has little gill slits there. And so we do have these pharyngeal gill slits, at least as part when we are an embryo. And then as we develop from a fetus, those pharyngeal gill slits actually become in our bodies part of our nose and upper jaw and lower jaw in our embryology. And then fourth, a muscular post-anal tail. And now you might say, well, Mr. Clark, I certainly don't have a tail. But again, if you were to look at us as a embryo, you would see that right down here, we have an anal opening and we had a little tail that, again, as we go through our development, that gets reabsorbed. So we are indeed a chordate. Now, before we talk about vertebrates, subphylum, let's talk about some of the more simple chordates before we move on. One of which is a tunicate, and that's a tunicate right here. Sometimes these are called sea squirts, and we have them in New England. They're about the size of a grape, and they're a filter feeder. And you might look at them and say, well, that looks more like a sponge, perhaps. But if you look at the larval form, it has those four characteristics, so it's a chordate. And then there's another group called the lancelets, and if you looked at those, you might say, well, that looks to me like some sort of worm species like we talked about before. But again, if you look at it closely, you see that it has those four different aspects of being a chordate. All right, well, we're going to focus on, for the rest of our discussion, to talk about vertebrates. So that where the notochord gave rise to vertebrae. And the first example of that would be the agnathans. These are the jawless fishes. They evolved about 350 million years ago. And these first fishes are represented today by only two living species. The one pictured here is a lamprey, which the video is about. And the other one is called a hagfish. But both of them have this feature of this jawless feature with these teeth and rasping tongue. And so this is as you'll see in the video, quite a parasite and can be quite harmful to the other types of fishes. So we only have two of these species left. And that's primarily because as we look at the evolution of fishes starting tomorrow, we'll see that the evolution of a jaw was essential at really making this fish species, the different fish species begin to diverge really quickly and become master predators. So that's the agnathans, the jawless fishes, and I hope all that helped.